Leadership often feels like a role we step into, a position with expectations and responsibilities, as if one day we simply become a leader and that's it. The job is to perform. But that belief, although common, is quietly misleading. The truth is gentler and deeper. Leadership is not an accomplishment. It is a continuous unfolding. A leader is not someone who has arrived. A leader is someone who keeps arriving again and again through curiosity, reflection, humility, and a commitment to growth. At the heart of great leadership lies one timeless principle: lifelong learning. But why must a leader keep learning? Why isn't experience alone enough? Why isn't passion or intelligence or confidence enough? Why do some leaders grow stronger with time while others fade, plateau, or become disconnected from their teams and environments? The answer is simple. Because the world moves, people evolve, challenges shift, and leadership itself transforms in front of our eyes. A leader who remains still eventually leads no one. Growth is not optional. It is foundational. Imagine a young leader stepping into a new role, nervous, excited, unsure, trying to carry confidence even when it feels slightly forced. She walks into meetings thinking she must have all the answers, must speak first, must look certain. She thinks leadership is about demonstrating competence. But slowly, experience changes her. She begins to see that leadership is not a performance. It is a practice. And practices thrive only through learning. What she discovers, gently, through small moments, is that leadership is actually about awareness. Learning expands that awareness. It sharpens perception, deepens emotional intelligence, broadens understanding, and softens a kind of ego that blocks insight. A leader who learns sees more, feels more, understands more, and therefore leads better. Learning gives leaders what experience alone cannot: perspective. Experience teaches what happened. Learning teaches why it matters. Experience builds memories. Learning builds wisdom. Experience shows the event. Learning shows the pattern. This distinction is what separates leaders who survive from leaders who mature. To understand why learning is essential, imagine another leader, one who stops growing. Perhaps he enters the workplace with passion and clarity. For a few years, he performs well, builds a reputation, becomes known for his skill set. But gradually, he becomes defensive. He starts dismissing new ideas. He stops asking questions. He stops listening genuinely. His team feels unheard. Younger employees sense that he is distant, locked in old methods. Innovation slows. Tension rises. He begins to feel misunderstood, even threatened, but fails to see his own rigidity. What he lacks is not talent. What he lacks is a learning mindset. Without learning, a leader becomes outdated. Not because the world punishes him, but because he refuses to update himself. Leadership is like a river. It flows. The moment you stop moving with it, you begin to sink. This is why humility becomes the first ingredient in lifelong learning. Humility does not mean weakness or uncertainty. It means the courage to admit that no matter how much you know, there is more to discover. It means holding your expertise lightly and your curiosity firmly. It means walking into every conversation with seniors, juniors, strangers, critics, with the willingness to be surprised. Leaders who learn recognize something powerful. Knowledge is not a destination. It is a landscape that keeps expanding. A learning mindset also protects leaders from another silent trap, the illusion of expertise. When a leader becomes good at their work, it is easy to feel secure in familiarity. But expertise, while valuable, can become a comfort zone. A leader might think, I know how this works. I've handled this before. And while that may be true, The danger lies in believing that past solutions guarantee future results. The world does not pause for our confidence. Industries shift, technologies transform, human needs evolve, crises emerge. What worked 5 years ago may be irrelevant today. A leader who keeps learning sees these shifts early. A leader who doesn't seize them too late. Learning also builds emotional depth. Leadership is not just about strategies or decisions. It is about people, their fears, motivations, insecurities, hopes, and frustrations. A leader who refuses to learn emotionally becomes disconnected from the team. But a leader who learns about empathy, communication styles, conflict resolution, and human behavior develops a sensitivity that strengthens relationships. Teams follow leaders who understand them, not leaders who control them. And then there's adaptability, perhaps the most important skill in today's world. A learning leader is adaptable because learning broadens their range of responses. When challenges come, and they always come, a learning leader is flexible. They don't panic at uncertainty. They don't collapse under pressure. They search, they explore, they think. Their mind doesn't freeze. It opens. Adaptability is not talent. It is trained through continuous learning. There is also something deeply human about leaders who learn. They become approachable. Their teams feel safe around them because they are not rigid, not judgmental, not stuck. They invite ideas. They welcome feedback. They admit mistakes. They celebrate improvements. They model growth. This is why learning is not just for the leader's benefit. It shapes the entire culture. When leaders learn, teams learn. When leaders grow, organizations grow. When leaders reflect, communication improves. And when leaders stay curious, innovation becomes natural. Ultimately, the question is not why should leaders learn, but how can they lead without learning? Leadership is a path of constant evolution. A leader who learns remains relevant, resilient, and responsible. A leader who stops learning becomes outdated, insecure, and disconnected. Learning is not an academic act. It is an emotional act, a spiritual act, a personal act. It is a willingness to be shaped, to be challenged, to be strengthened. Leadership is not a state. It is a journey. And learning is the map that keeps that journey alive. What does it really mean to learn like a leader? There comes a moment in every person's journey when they realize that learning is no longer about gathering information. It is about becoming someone new. Leaders are not defined by titles or positions. They are shaped slowly, quietly, and consistently by the way they interact with the world, how they observe, respond, adapt, and transform the raw material of daily life into wisdom. In this sense, learning is not an academic exercise, but a deeply human one. It is a habit, a rhythm, a mindset. To learn like a leader means to let life teach you, even when you feel unprepared. It means allowing experiences to sharpen your vision instead of clouding it. It means refusing to stay the same when growth is calling you to evolve. This kind of learning is intimate and personal. It happens in the small spaces between action and reflection, in the quiet moments when you admit to yourself that you do not know everything, and in the courageous moments when you take your first step anyway. Many people imagine leaders as individuals overflowing with confidence, clarity, and certainty. But real leaders are rarely certain. They are curious. They are observant. They are willing to ask, what can this moment teach me? Instead of relying on rigid assumptions or past successes, they treat every challenge as a training ground. They see feedback as a mirror, not a weapon. They interpret setbacks as signals, not failures. This is why they continue to rise. Not because they do not fall, but because they extract meaning from every fall. Think of a leader you admire. You may notice that they listen more than they speak. They absorb insights from others with openness instead of defensiveness. They pay attention to details that others overlook. They are humble enough to be taught by a student, inspired by a beginner, or corrected by someone younger. They understand that ego kills learning, while curiosity nurtures it. And it is this humility, not authority, that makes them powerful. Let's imagine a simple scene. A young woman starts a new job in a field she barely understands. She feels lost in meetings, intimidated by colleagues, unsure what she brings to the table. But instead of shrinking into silence, she takes a notebook and begins to observe. She writes what she doesn't understand, notes patterns, watches how others communicate, and asks thoughtful questions. Every day, she learns one small thing. Over months, she grows. Her confidence is not built from praise or titles, but from her willingness to learn forward. By the time opportunities appear before her, she is ready, not because she knew everything from the beginning, but because she allowed learning to shape her. This is what leadership learning truly looks like. Small, consistent, deliberate steps carried out with intention. Learning like a leader also means learning from discomfort. Most people avoid situations that challenge them. Leaders lean into them. They understand that discomfort is not a threat, but an invitation to expand beyond old beliefs, old fears, and old patterns. When a leader feels resistance, they ask, "What is this teaching me about myself?" If they face conflict, they explore the underlying message. If they receive criticism, they seek the truth hidden inside it rather than reacting emotionally. This approach does not make life easier. It makes the person stronger. In a professional environment, leadership learning requires a deliberate structure. It involves reflection after tasks, analysis after decisions, and a willingness to refine methods instead of repeating them blindly. Leaders constantly evaluate what worked, what didn't, and what could be done differently. They treat their own performance with the same honesty that they apply to their goals. This discipline is what elevates them. But beyond discipline, learning like a leader is also deeply emotional. It requires emotional agility, the ability to move through emotions without being controlled by them. Leaders feel fear, frustration, doubt, insecurity, and overwhelm just like everyone else. The difference is that they do not let those emotions freeze them. They pause, breathe, interpret, and respond with clarity. They observe their emotional reactions the way a scientist observes a phenomenon, not to judge themselves, but to understand themselves. This emotional awareness becomes a form of intelligence. When leaders understand themselves, they understand others more deeply. When they can manage their own reactions, they create environments that feel safe for others to learn, share, and grow. Their confidence becomes a calm presence rather than a loud performance. There is another side to learning like a leader, the willingness to unlearn. In the journey of growth, unlearning is sometimes more important than learning. People often accumulate beliefs, habits, fears, or assumptions that once protected them, but now limit them. Leaders recognize when a belief is outdated. They allow themselves to release rigid perspectives, even when those perspectives once defined them. They let go of perfectionism, because perfection blocks learning. They let go of defensiveness, because defensiveness blocks feedback. They let go of impatience, because impatience blocks growth. Unlearning is an act of bravery. It requires honesty and gentleness, a willingness to accept that the person you used to be cannot take you to the place you want to reach. And then there is a heart of leadership learning, self-reflection. Leaders create space to think. They sit with their thoughts without rushing to conclusions. They observe their patterns. They ask themselves hard questions. They evaluate how their actions align with their values. They look at each day as an opportunity to understand themselves more clearly. This inner reflection builds integrity, a trait that no book, course, or training can teach directly. Let us picture an experienced leader sitting alone after a long day. Instead of celebrating achievements or complaining about difficulties, she quietly reviews her decisions. She asks, where did I act with wisdom? Where did I react impulsively? What did I miss? What did I learn about myself today? These questions sharpen her character. Over time, they become part of her internal dialogue. This is why she grows steadily even in environments where others feel stagnant. Learning like a leader also means learning from diverse people. Leaders borrow wisdom from everywhere, from mentors, from colleagues, from books, from mistakes, from strangers, even from those who disagree with them. They understand that learning is a collective inheritance. No one grows alone. They surround themselves with people who challenge them, not just those who praise them. They listen to ideas they do not instantly understand, because they know that wisdom often comes disguised in discomfort. Finally, learning like a leader means turning knowledge into action. A person may read hundreds of books, attend workshops, and listen to mentors, but if they never apply what they learn, growth will remain theoretical. Leaders translate insight into practice. When they learn something new, they test it, they adapt it, they integrate it. They make learning visible in how they lead, communicate, plan, and collaborate. This is the true essence of learning like a leader: absorbing, interpreting, transforming, and applying. It is not about being the smartest in the room. It is about being the most open, the most observant, and the most willing to evolve. Leaders understand that the world is a constant teacher, and every moment holds a lesson, if only the heart is ready to receive it. How do leaders turn everyday experiences into lifelong wisdom? Asterisk, asterisk. There's a quiet art to transforming ordinary moments into meaningful insight. It is something remarkable leaders do effortlessly, even though it often looks invisible from the outside. People assume that leaders grow because they have access to special resources, rare opportunities, or advanced training. But the truth is simpler and far more empowering. Leaders grow because they treat everyday life as their classroom. Every conversation is a lesson. Every failure is a message. Every success is a responsibility. Every challenge is a doorway. Leaders do not wait for perfect conditions to learn. They learn from what is already in front of them. They move through life with a kind of attentive awareness, a mindset that asks, what is this trying to teach me? Instead of, why is this happening to me? This shift in perspective changes everything. Let's begin with the most common source of wisdom: experience. Experience teaches through contrast. What worked, what didn't, what felt right, what felt wrong, what brought results, and what created confusion. But experience alone is not enough. Many people go through the same situations repeatedly without learning anything new. Leaders are different because they pause to examine their experiences. They reflect. They draw meaning. They adjust. They evolve. Imagine a person who leads a small team. One afternoon, she notices tension rising during a discussion. Voices become sharper, body language shifts, and no one seemed to be hearing each other. Instead of forcing her opinion or silence in the room, she quietly observes. After the meeting, she reflects, why did the energy change? What was the emotional need hidden beneath their words? How can I create a space where people feel safe to express concerns without conflict? The next day, she changes her approach. She gently encourages each team member to share their perspective one by one. She listens more deeply. She mirrors their emotions with empathy. Slowly, the environment softens. This is wisdom extracted from experience, not gained through theory, but through mindful observation. Another way leaders gain wisdom is through pattern recognition. They begin to notice recurring dynamics, how people respond to pressure, how decisions shape outcomes, how emotions influence communication, how small habits accumulate into major consequences. They see the link between causes and effects. They understand the hidden threads that connect actions to results. Over time, they can anticipate challenges before they arise, not because they predict the future, but because they recognize patterns they have seen before. Wisdom also grows through listening. Leaders listen deeply, not just to words, but to tone, silence, hesitation, emotion, and intention. They listen to understand, not to reply. This kind of listening reveals truths that others miss. A team member's sudden quietness may indicate burnout. A client's uncertainty may hint at a deeper fear. A colleague's enthusiasm may reveal a new opportunity. Leaders pick up these subtle signals because they listen with sensitivity instead of judgment. Listening also extends inward. Leaders listen to their intuition, that quiet inner voice that whispers truths before the mind can articulate them. Intuition is not magic. It is a wisdom accumulated from countless subtle experiences. When leaders trust their intuition, they are drawing from the wisdom stored deep within them. Another major source of wisdom is failure, perhaps the most misunderstood teacher of all. Many people treat failure as something to hide or avoid. Leaders treat failure as a mentor. They understand that setbacks contain information, what strategies are ineffective, what assumptions were wrong, what skills need strengthening, what blind spots need attention. Instead of feeling embarrassed or discouraged, they analyze their failures with honesty and curiosity. Picture a leader who launches a project that doesn't succeed. Instead of blaming others or giving up, she gathers her team and says, "Let's understand what this experience is trying to show us." They review decisions calmly. They separate emotion from evaluation. They extract lessons without shame. This attitude transforms failure from a threat into a teacher. And because the team sees failure handled with maturity, they feel safer to take risks and innovate in the future. Leaders also grow wiser through feedback, even when it is uncomfortable. Many people avoid feedback because it exposes weaknesses. Leaders welcome feedback because it reveals truth. They know that someone else's perspective may uncover blind spots they cannot see themselves. Instead of reacting defensively, they absorb feedback thoughtfully. They ask questions. They interpret it through a lens of growth rather than judgment. Over time, this openness sharpens their self-awareness and deepens their emotional maturity. In addition, leaders learn from diversity of experience. They step outside their comfort zones. They explore new environments, engage with people from different backgrounds, and expose themselves to unfamiliar ideas. They understand that wisdom grows when the mind is stretched. A leader may learn leadership from observing a teacher in a crowded classroom, a vendor negotiating prices in a marketplace, a parent guiding a child, or a stranger offering kindness. Wisdom is everywhere, and leaders have the eyes to see it. Another important element in the creation of wisdom is storytelling. Leaders make sense of their experiences by turning them into stories, narratives that give shape, meaning, and coherence to events. When they describe what they went through, what they learned, and how it changed them, they deepen their understanding. Storytelling transforms experience into knowledge, and knowledge into wisdom. It also allows leaders to pass their insight on to others in a way that feels human and relatable. Wisdom is also cultivated through stillness and reflection. Leaders understand the value of quiet time. In a world full of noise, reflection creates the mental space needed to absorb insight. It is a moment of silence that connections form, understanding deepens, and clarity emerges. Some leaders journal. Some take walks at the end of the day. Some engage in meditation or prayer. Some simply sit quietly, letting the mind settle. This reflective rhythm becomes a well from which they draw wisdom. Let's imagine a woman who ends her day by sitting alone with a cup of tea. She revisits the conversation she had, the decision she made, the emotion she felt. She notices where she acted with grace and where she acted out of fear. She gently asks herself, what did today teach me? How can I show up differently tomorrow? This daily practice becomes her compass. It guides her growth. It strengthens her intuition. It refines her character. Leaders also gain wisdom through observation of others. They study how different people handle adversity, communicate, collaborate, and manage emotions. They learn from mentors, colleagues, and even from those they do not admire. Every person becomes a teacher. Leaders collect these insights and integrate them into their own approach, forming a wider understanding of human behavior. Finally, leaders transform experience into wisdom by taking action on what they learn. Wisdom is not passive. It becomes visible only when applied. When leaders change their behavior based on insight, when they adjust their strategies based on experience, when they communicate differently because they have understood something new, that is when wisdom becomes real. It takes root. It shapes their leadership. It influences their environment. This is how leaders grow, not through rare opportunities or secret formulas, but through a commitment to learning from life itself. They live with awareness. They reflect with intention. They act with courage. They listen with openness. They extract meaning from every moment. Over time, this way of living turns ordinary experiences into extraordinary wisdom. How can leaders transform knowledge into effective action? Leadership is not measured by knowledge alone. It is measured by how that knowledge is translated into action. Many people accumulate insights, strategies, and theories, but never truly lead because they stop at understanding. Leaders, however, bridge the gap between awareness and execution. They know that learning without action is like collecting water in a leaky vessel. The resource exists, but it never nourishes. True leadership arises when knowledge, experience, and insight converge in deliberate, meaningful action. The journey from knowledge to action begins with clarity. Leaders understand what matters most and prioritize accordingly. They recognize that energy is finite, time is fleeting, and focus is essential. Every decision, every movement, every conversation becomes purposeful. They do not scatter themselves across too many initiatives. They direct their energy where it has the greatest impact. This clarity is born from reflection, from observing patterns, and from understanding the needs of the people they lead. Consider the story of a leader in a growing organization. She notices a recurring problem. Projects are delayed because communication is fragmented. She has read books, attended seminars, and consulted experts. But she does not stop there. She observes her team, listens to their frustrations, and maps the workflow. Then she experiments. She implements short daily check-ins, introduces a simple shared platform for updates, and encourages open feedback. Within weeks, efficiency improves. She has transformed knowledge into practical action that changes outcomes. Leaders also embrace incremental experimentation. They understand that action does not have to be perfect. They start small, test ideas, learn from feedback, and adjust. This iterative approach minimizes risk, builds confidence, and creates momentum. The world is complex, and leaders know that waiting for certainty often leads to stagnation. They act courageously, knowing that missteps are part of the learning process. Action also requires courage. The courage to face uncertainty, the courage to make difficult decisions, and the courage to accept accountability for results. Leaders take responsibility for outcomes, whether positive or negative, and this accountability reinforces trust. Teams follow leaders who stand by their actions because they know that leadership is grounded in integrity, not avoidance. Consider a team facing a tight deadline. The leader realizes that the original plan is unrealistic. Many might hesitate, fearing backlash or criticism. The leader, however, calmly evaluates options, communicates transparently, reallocates resources, and sets a revised plan in motion. She models composure under pressure, turning knowledge into decisive action. Her team observes not only the effectiveness of the plan, but also the strength of her example. Leaders also transform knowledge into action through alignment with values. Decisions and initiatives are most effective when they resonate with the leader's core principles. Knowledge without alignment can lead to inconsistent or hollow action. Leaders ask themselves, does this action reflect what I truly believe? Does it serve the people and purpose I am committed to? When knowledge and values converge, action becomes authentic, persuasive, and sustainable. Another key aspect of effective action is communication. Knowledge is not useful if it remains in isolation. Leaders articulate insights clearly and compellingly. They translate abstract ideas into actionable steps, ensuring that the team understands not only the what, but also the why. This clarity inspires confidence and commitment. People are motivated when they understand the purpose behind their tasks, not just the mechanics. Storytelling plays a role here as well. Leaders often convey knowledge through stories. Simple narratives that illustrate principles, highlight patterns, and inspire reflection. Stories make abstract ideas concrete. They provide context. They evoke emotional understanding, which strengthens learning and motivates action. A team member may forget a statistic or a process, but they rarely forget a story that resonates deeply. Leaders also act with strategic patience. Action does not mean haste. Leaders weigh the consequences, consider timing, and evaluate context. They recognize that thoughtful timing amplifies impact. Acting too soon may squander opportunity. Acting too late may miss it entirely. Leaders navigate this balance, combining decisiveness with prudence. Another dimension of transforming knowledge into action is mentoring and delegation. Leaders do not hoard knowledge. They distribute it, empowering others to act. They identify strengths in their team and delegate responsibilities accordingly. By doing so, they multiply the effect of knowledge, foster skill development, and create a culture where learning leads to collective action. A leader who equips others ensures that knowledge becomes living practice, not stagnant theory. Leaders also leverage reflection on past actions. Every initiative, every decision, and every interaction offers lessons. Effective leaders review outcomes, asking, what worked? What did not? What could be improved? This feedback loop strengthens future actions, transforming each experience into compounded wisdom. They view their history not as a record of success or failure, but as a dynamic resource for continuous improvement. Consider a leader who initiates a community project. After completion, she reviews what worked well, what logistical challenges arose, how the team felt, and how the impact was perceived. She documents insights, shares lessons with colleagues, and integrates adjustments for future initiatives. Action becomes iterative, each step informed by reflection and intention. Leaders also transform knowledge into action through resilience. Knowledge alone cannot overcome obstacles. Action demands perseverance. Leaders expect setbacks but refuse to be defined by them. They persist, adapt, and continue moving forward. Resilience turns insight into sustained practice, allowing leaders to weather challenges without losing sight of purpose. A further dimension is ethical action. Leaders understand that knowledge used without integrity can harm more than it helps. Wisdom is measured not only by results, but by the way those results are achieved. Leaders apply knowledge responsibly, ensuring that their actions honor values, people, and long-term outcomes. Integrity amplifies the credibility and influence of leadership action. Finally, leaders know that knowledge and action are inseparable. Learning without doing stagnates. Doing without learning becomes reckless. The balance of reflection, insight, courage, and disciplined action forms the essence of leadership. Leaders move through the world aware, intentional, and engaged. Every step is informed by what they have learned and guided by the outcomes they hope to create. In practice, transforming knowledge into action is a daily commitment. It may appear in small gestures, offering feedback with kindness, clarifying expectations, sharing insights, or modeling a new habit. It may also appear in major initiatives, implementing strategy, navigating crisis, or leading cultural change. In every case, the principle remains: knowledge only fulfills its purpose when it is activated. Ultimately, the power of leadership lies not in knowing more than others, but in doing what matters with what is known. This is what separates observers from leaders, thinkers from doers, potential from impact. Leaders transform their learning into action, their insights into influence, and their experience into results. By cultivating this practice, leaders ensure that every lesson, every observation, and every reflection translates into growth for themselves, their teams, and the environments they touch. Knowledge becomes meaningful only when it shapes behavior, inspires others, and produces tangible, positive outcomes. Leadership, at its core, is this delicate dance between awareness and action, insight and execution, reflection and courage. How do leaders learn from people around them? Leadership is rarely a solitary endeavor. Even the most visionary, self-reliant leader is shaped by the people they encounter. Teams, mentors, colleagues, friends, critics, and even strangers all contribute to the learning journey. Leaders understand that wisdom is not owned, it is collected, observed, and absorbed. Every human interaction carries insight if one is willing to notice it. Learning from people is not about imitation. It is about observation, interpretation, and thoughtful integration of the lessons others' experiences provide. To learn from people effectively, a leader begins with humility. Humility opens the mind and softens the ego, allowing one to receive insights without defensiveness. It is the willingness to acknowledge that knowledge exists outside oneself. Leaders know they do not have all the answers and are unafraid to seek guidance. This attitude turns colleagues into teachers, peers into mirrors, and challenges into opportunities for growth. Consider a story of a leader who joined a new team in an unfamiliar industry. Initially, she assumed she had the expertise to navigate the environment on her own. Yet as she observed, she realized that her team members possessed knowledge and experience she had never encountered before. Instead of asserting control, she began asking questions, listening attentively, and encouraging contributions. Over time, she discovered strategies, insights, and approaches she could not have imagined alone. By learning from people around her, she not only grew personally, but also built a culture of respect and collaboration. Learning from people also involves active listening more than hearing words. It is perceiving tone, body language, and underlying intent. Leaders who listen actively pick up on unspoken challenges, hidden talents, and subtle patterns of behavior. A team member's hesitation, a mentor's caution, or a peer's excitement can reveal profound lessons if attended to carefully. This type of listening requires patience and focus, and it turns ordinary interactions into rich opportunities for understanding. Another important aspect is emotional intelligence. Leaders pay attention to how others feel, respond, and behave. They interpret reactions without judgment and respond with empathy. Understanding human emotion is central to learning from people. A leader who can navigate interpersonal dynamics gracefully will extract insights from every conversation and apply them wisely. Emotional intelligence amplifies learning because it allows a leader to move beyond surface observations into deeper understanding. Leaders also learn from mentors and role models. They seek out individuals whose experience and judgment they respect. Mentorship can take many forms: direct guidance, observation, or even studying the career of someone admired from afar. Leaders approach mentors not with the goal of copying them, but with the intention of understanding their strategies, values, and decision-making processes. Every mentor offers a perspective that expands the leader's own frame of reference. However, learning from people is not limited to those we admire. Leaders gain equally from critics and challengers. Constructive criticism, though uncomfortable, often highlights blind spots that would otherwise remain hidden. A leader who embraces feedback demonstrates courage and resilience. They listen without defensiveness, ask clarifying questions, and integrate insights into future decisions. The ability to learn from dissenting voices strengthens judgment and builds credibility. Observation of peers and teams provides another dimension of learning. Leaders study successful behaviors and mistakes within their immediate environment. They note patterns of collaboration, problem-solving, communication, and initiative. They recognize what motivates individuals, how decisions ripple through groups, and how energy flows in various contexts. By observing these dynamics, leaders develop intuition and refine their approaches to guiding teams effectively. Storytelling also facilitates learning from people. Leaders reflect on experiences shared by others and extract meaning. A colleague's account of a challenge may offer lessons on resilience. A team member's reflection on a project may reveal insights about communication. By internalizing these narratives, leaders broaden their understanding without personally experiencing every situation themselves. Stories become a vehicle for secondhand wisdom, enriching decision-making and perspective. An essential skill in learning from people is asking thoughtful questions. Leaders do not settle for superficial answers. They probe with curiosity, seeking understanding beyond immediate facts. Questions such as what influenced your decision, or how did you approach this challenge, or what did you learn from that experience, invite deeper reflection and often reveal hidden insights. The art of questioning allows leaders to extract knowledge while empowering others to articulate their understanding. Leaders also benefit from learning in diverse environments. Engaging with individuals from different cultures, industries, and backgrounds expands thinking. Exposure to diversity challenges assumptions and reveals alternative strategies. Leaders who embrace diversity develop flexible thinking, adaptability, and creativity. They learn that there is rarely a single right way to approach a problem. Multiple perspectives enrich solutions and strengthen judgment. Learning from people requires patience. Not every lesson is immediate or obvious. Leaders pay attention over time, observing patterns and behaviors, and synthesizing insights gradually. They recognize that human experience is layered, complex, and often subtle. A quick judgment may overlook nuance. Deliberate observation captures depth. This slow, attentive approach ensures that lessons are meaningful and enduring. Another dimension is teaching as a form of learning. Leaders often find that sharing knowledge with others clarifies their own understanding. When they mentor, guide, or train, they refine their insight and consolidate wisdom. Interaction is reciprocal. Teaching allows leaders to reflect on their assumptions, identify gaps in knowledge, and discover new approaches. Leaders also learn from collective decision-making. By involving teams in problem solving, they gain insight into perspectives, priorities, and creative approaches they may not have considered. Collaborative learning strengthens both the individual leader and the group, creating a shared understanding that improves performance and cohesion. Leaders model learning when they value contributions, integrate feedback, and adjust strategies based on collective insight. Importantly, learning from people includes acknowledging failures and successes in others. Observing how others navigate setbacks teaches resilience. Seeing how someone achieves success through persistence or creativity offers replicable strategies. Leaders internalize these lessons, adapting approaches to fit their context without copying blindly. This reflective synthesis ensures that learning is applied thoughtfully and ethically. Finally, leaders recognize that learning from people is ongoing. Relationships evolve, contexts shift, and people grow. A leader must remain attentive, adaptable, and open, continually updating understanding. Learning from people is not a one-time effort. It is a lifelong practice that strengthens judgment, empathy, and influence. By committing to this practice, leaders cultivate environments where everyone feels valued and heard. Knowledge spreads. Collaboration thrives. Growth becomes collective. Leadership becomes more than individual success. It becomes a living, learning ecosystem. Leaders who learn from people inspire others to do the same, creating a ripple effect of insight, resilience, and progress. In essence, learning from people transforms leaders from managers of tasks into stewards of human potential. It equips them with insight, humility, empathy, and adaptability, qualities that make leadership not only effective but profoundly meaningful. By observing, listening, reflecting, and integrating the wisdom of those around them, leaders transform everyday interactions into powerful opportunities for growth, shaping themselves and their teams in the process. What personal habits shape a leader's growth? Leadership is not built in grand gestures alone. It is cultivated quietly, habit by habit, day by day. The most effective leaders are those who deliberately shape their routines, their mindset, and their inner world to foster continuous growth. Personal habits are the invisible architecture of leadership. They determine how consistently a leader learns, reflects, acts, and inspires. Without disciplined habits, even the most talented individual risks stagnation. With them, ordinary effort transforms into extraordinary impact. One of the most foundational habits is daily reflection. Leaders who grow intentionally take time to pause and consider their experiences, decisions, and interactions. Reflection is not an indulgence. It is a deliberate act of self-awareness. It allows leaders to identify patterns, notice blind spots, and recognize opportunities for improvement. Some leaders journal at the end of the day, recording what they learned, what surprised them, and what could have been done differently. Others prefer quiet walks, meditation, or moments of stillness. The key is consistency. Regular reflection transforms scattered experiences into coherent insight. Closely linked to reflection is the habit of setting clear intentions. Every action a leader takes becomes more meaningful when guided by a conscious purpose. Leaders regularly ask themselves, what do I hope to achieve today? How can I act in alignment with my values? How will my decisions influence those around me? Setting intentions does not create rigidity. Instead, it provides direction amidst complexity. It ensures that effort aligns with impact and that learning translates into purposeful action. Another critical habit is curiosity. Leaders cultivate an ongoing desire to understand the world, people, and themselves. Curiosity drives exploration, fuels learning, and challenges complacency. It motivates leaders to ask questions, seek diverse perspectives, and investigate unfamiliar ideas. Without curiosity, knowledge becomes stagnant and growth halts. Curiosity also fosters humility, as leaders acknowledge how much remains unknown, even in their areas of expertise. Active listening is a habit that transforms relationships and learning. Leaders practice listening not merely to respond, but to understand. They observe tone, body language, and context. They ask thoughtful questions to clarify meaning. This habit strengthens connection, uncovers hidden insights, and builds trust. Listening actively ensures that leaders learn from others continuously, turning everyday interactions into opportunities for growth. Leaders also cultivate the habit of learning from mistakes. Rather than avoiding errors or blaming circumstances, they analyze missteps with curiosity and honesty. They identify the root causes of failure, explore alternative approaches, and integrate these lessons into future action. This habit creates resilience and reinforces a culture where experimentation and innovation are encouraged. Teams feel safe to take calculated risks when they see leaders treat mistakes as valuable teachers rather than threats. Consistency is another defining habit. Growth requires repeated, deliberate effort. Leaders show up daily, even when motivation wanes, modeling discipline and reliability. Whether it is reviewing strategy, mentoring others, or developing skills, consistent practice compounds over time. A leader who consistently acts with intention, listens, reflects, and adapts builds trust and cultivates excellence in themselves and their teams. Emotional self-regulation is a habit that cannot be overlooked. Leaders encounter stress, conflict, and unpredictability regularly. Those who manage their emotions effectively maintain clarity and composure, even under pressure. They pause before reacting, interpret emotional signals thoughtfully, and respond with empathy rather than impulse. Emotional self-regulation enhances decision-making, strengthens relationships, and models stability for others. Another subtle but powerful habit is gratitude and acknowledgement. Leaders who recognize the contributions, efforts, and growth of those around them foster a positive environment. They habitually express appreciation, celebrate progress, and acknowledge challenges faced by their teams. This habit reinforces motivation, loyalty, and collective learning. It also keeps the leader grounded, reminding them that leadership is a shared journey rather than a solitary pursuit. Leaders also nurture the habit of continuous learning beyond formal environments. They read widely, attend workshops, explore new fields, and seek perspectives outside their comfort zone. They experiment with new strategies, technologies, and methodologies. They maintain a beginner's mindset, approaching each day as an opportunity to grow. Continuous learning is not reactive. It is proactive, a deliberate choice to evolve alongside the changing world. Decision review is a habit that deepens insight. Leaders regularly examine the outcomes of their choices. What went well? What could have been done differently? What influenced the outcome beyond my control? This practice sharpens judgment, develops foresight, and strengthens accountability. By systematically reflecting on decisions, leaders internalize lessons and apply them more effectively in the future. Mindfulness is increasingly recognized as a critical leadership habit. Mindful leaders are present, attentive, and responsive rather than reactive. They notice subtle cues, absorb information fully, and make deliberate choices rather than defaulting to habit. Mindfulness enhances awareness of self and others, strengthens focus, and allows leaders to navigate complexity with clarity. Leaders also cultivate relationship building as a habit. They intentionally connect with mentors, peers, and team members. They invest time in understanding people, building trust, and nurturing collaboration. These relationships become conduits of insight, support, and perspective. A leader who habitually nurtures connections creates a learning ecosystem where collective intelligence flourishes. Finally, leaders embrace the habit of resilience and persistence. Challenges, setbacks, and failures are inevitable, but leaders treat them as temporary conditions rather than permanent barriers. They cultivate mental stamina, patience, and determination. This habit reinforces courage and fosters a mindset where obstacles are opportunities to refine strategies, test resilience, and deepen understanding. All these habits, reflection, intention, curiosity, listening, learning from mistakes, consistency, emotional regulation, gratitude, continuous learning, decision review, mindfulness, relationship building, and resilience form the foundation of a leader's growth. They are neither glamorous nor instantaneous, but their impact compounds over time. Habits shape character, and character shapes leadership. Leaders understand that personal habits influence organizational culture. By modeling curiosity, reflection, empathy, and accountability, leaders inspire similar practices among their teams. Habits become contagious. When leaders prioritize continuous growth, their teams naturally adopt a learning mindset, creating a cycle of improvement that extends beyond any individual. Leadership is not a role that exists only in moments of decision or visibility. It is cultivated in quiet, daily practices. The habits leaders choose to develop determine whether they stagnate or flourish, whether their influence deepens or fades, and whether their leadership is authentic or performative. Growth is not accidental. It is habitual. By intentionally crafting habits that support reflection, learning, action, and resilience, leaders ensure that they remain adaptable, perceptive, and capable of inspiring others. Personal habits are the bridge between potential and impact, the subtle, consistent forces that enable leaders to transform insight into influence, knowledge into action, and intention into meaningful outcomes. How can leaders sustain growth and inspire others? Leadership is not a destination. It is a continuous journey. Even the most skilled, knowledgeable, and reflective leaders must consciously sustain growth to remain effective. Sustaining growth requires deliberate strategies, intentional habits, and a mindset that embraces evolution. Beyond personal advancement, it also involves inspiring others to grow alongside you, creating an environment where learning, adaptation, and excellence are shared values. Leaders who achieve this balance transform influence into legacy, insight into culture, and effort into enduring impact. The first key to sustaining growth is consistency in learning and reflection. Leaders do not rely on occasional inspiration or crisis-driven insight. They engage in daily practices that sharpen perception, expand understanding, and reinforce values. Journaling, thoughtful review of decisions, revisiting goals, and reflecting on experiences create a rhythm of growth. These habits prevent stagnation and ensure that lessons from yesterday guide actions today. Without consistent reflection, leaders risk repeating mistakes, overlooking blind spots, or becoming disconnected from evolving realities. Another crucial element is adaptability. The world, organizations, and people are constantly changing. A leader who clings rigidly to old methods or perspectives gradually loses relevance. Sustained growth comes from the ability to adjust strategies, revise assumptions, and embrace innovation. Adaptable leaders monitor trends, listen to feedback, and remain open to new approaches. They understand that growth is dynamic, not linear, and that the ability to pivot gracefully is essential for long-term effectiveness. Mentorship and collaboration play a vital role in sustaining leadership growth. Even experienced leaders benefit from guidance, perspective, and challenge. Seeking mentorship from trusted advisors, learning from peers, and engaging in collaborative problem-solving expand understanding and sharpen judgment. Collaboration also reinforces humility, as leaders recognize the value of diverse expertise and experience. Those who sustain growth understand that leadership is relational. The more they learn from others, the more effectively they guide and inspire. Leaders also prioritize resilience and emotional stamina. Growth is not a smooth path. It includes setbacks, criticism, and unforeseen challenges. Resilient leaders recover quickly, extract lessons from adversity, and maintain focus on long-term goals. Emotional stamina allows leaders to navigate high-pressure situations without compromising clarity, integrity, or composure. This resilience is not innate. It is cultivated through self-awareness, reflection, and deliberate practice. An often overlooked factor in sustaining growth is self-care and balance. Leaders who neglect physical, mental, or emotional well-being cannot lead effectively over time. Sustainable growth requires attention to energy, health, and mindfulness. Exercise, rest, healthy habits, and emotional regulation are not luxuries. They are strategic practices that allow leaders to perform consistently, think clearly, and respond with empathy. Leaders who model balance also encourage their teams to do the same, fostering a culture of sustainable performance. Vision and purpose are central to maintaining momentum. Leaders who sustain growth operate from a clear sense of direction. They understand why their work matters, how it connects to broader goals, and what legacy they aim to create. Purpose-driven leadership aligns daily actions with long-term aspirations, creating coherence between strategy and values. This clarity motivates both the leader and the team, ensuring that efforts remain focused and meaningful. Inspiring others is inseparable from sustaining one's own growth. Leaders who embody curiosity, reflection, resilience, and ethical action naturally attract engagement and loyalty. They mentor, guide, and create opportunities for others to develop. By modeling growth, they create a ripple effect. Teams adopt a learning mindset, embrace feedback, and pursue improvement. Leadership becomes a shared journey rather than a solitary endeavor. Recognition and celebration of progress are also important. Leaders who acknowledge milestones, both small and large, reinforce motivation and highlight the value of continuous effort. Celebrating achievements does not mean avoiding critique. It means balancing accountability with encouragement. This habit strengthens culture, morale, and a collective drive toward excellence. Leaders who sustain growth also practice strategic foresight. They anticipate challenges, identify opportunities, and plan proactively. By observing trends, listening to insights from diverse sources, and reflecting on past experiences, leaders make informed choices that prepare their team for change. Strategic foresight ensures that growth is forward-looking, not reactive, and that knowledge is applied in ways that create lasting impact. Another important dimension is ethical consistency. Leaders who grow sustainably maintain integrity in decisions, actions, and relationships. Ethics are not negotiable. They anchor growth in credibility and trust. Teams are inspired by leaders whose conduct aligns with values consistently, even under pressure. Ethical leadership transforms influence into a legacy, ensuring that impact endures beyond any single project, initiative, or tenure. Leaders sustain growth by cultivating a culture of curiosity and innovation. They encourage questioning, experimentation, and exploration within their teams. They create safe spaces where ideas can be tested. Failures are learning opportunities, and diverse perspectives are valued. By fostering collective growth, leaders multiply their influence, empowering others to develop skills, insight, and confidence. The organization itself becomes a living, learning entity, resilient to change and adaptive to challenges. Self-awareness and humility remain central to long-term leadership. Leaders must continually assess their strengths, limitations, and biases. They remain open to feedback, willing to adjust behavior, and attentive to the evolving needs of their teams. Sustained growth requires humility, the acknowledgement that leadership is a journey, not a status. Humility keeps leaders approachable, curious, and aligned with both purpose and people. Finally, leaders sustain growth through reflection on impact and legacy. They ask themselves not only how they are performing, but what difference they are making in the lives of others. They consider whether their influence cultivates learning, development, and empowerment. This reflective habit ensures that growth is meaningful, purpose-driven, and lasting. Leaders who sustain growth think beyond short-term success, focusing on enduring influence and collective advancement. In conclusion, sustaining leadership growth is a multifaceted practice that blends personal discipline, reflection, resilience, ethical integrity, adaptability, and relational intelligence. It is cultivated through daily habits, intentional strategies, and a mindset oriented toward learning, action, and collective development. Leaders who sustain growth not only advance themselves, but also inspire others to flourish, creating a culture where knowledge, insight, and capability multiply. Leadership becomes a living process, continuous, evolving, and transformative. The journey never ends, and in embracing that journey, leaders leave a legacy far greater than any individual achievement. A thriving, empowered, and resilient community of learners and doers. Leaders who sustain growth also practice strategic foresight. They anticipate challenges, identify opportunities, and plan proactively. By observing trends, listening to insights from diverse sources, and reflecting on past experiences, leaders make informed choices that prepare their team for change. Strategic foresight ensures that growth is forward-looking, not reactive, and that knowledge is applied in ways that create lasting impact. Another important dimension is ethical consistency. Leaders who grow sustainably maintain integrity in decisions, actions, and relationships. Ethics are not negotiable. They anchor growth in credibility and trust. Teams are inspired by leaders whose conduct aligns with values consistently, even under pressure. Ethical leadership transforms influence into a legacy, ensuring that impact endures beyond any single project, initiative, or tenure. Leaders sustain growth by cultivating a culture of curiosity and innovation. They encourage questioning, experimentation, and exploration within their teams. They create safe spaces where ideas can be tested. Failures are learning opportunities, and diverse perspectives are valued. By fostering collective growth, leaders multiply their influence, empowering others to develop skills, insight, and confidence. The organization itself becomes a living, learning entity, resilient to change and adaptive to challenges. Self-awareness and humility remain central to long-term leadership. Leaders must continually assess their strengths, limitations, and biases. They remain open to feedback, willing to adjust behavior, and attentive to the evolving needs of their teams. Sustained growth requires humility, the acknowledgement that leadership is a journey, not a status. Humility keeps leaders approachable, curious, and aligned with both purpose and people. Finally, leaders sustain growth through reflection on impact and legacy. They ask themselves not only how they are performing, but what difference they are making in the lives of others. They consider whether their influence cultivates learning, development, and empowerment. This reflective habit ensures that growth is meaningful, purpose-driven, and lasting. Leaders who sustain growth think beyond short-term success, focusing on enduring influence and collective advancement. In conclusion, sustaining leadership growth is a multifaceted practice that blends personal discipline, reflection, resilience, ethical integrity, adaptability, and relational intelligence. It is cultivated through daily habits, intentional strategies, and a mindset oriented toward learning, action, and collective development. Leaders who sustain growth not only advance themselves, but also inspire others to flourish, creating a culture where knowledge, insight, and capability multiply. Leadership becomes a living process, continuous, evolving, and transformative. The journey never ends, and in embracing that journey, leaders leave a legacy far greater than any individual achievement. A thriving, empowered, and resilient community of learners and doers.